Alright guys, we're back staring at my engine bay, and in this video we're going to talk about some things that I recommend you check out before you buy a car with the B58 engine. Now keep in mind that this engine comes in a lot of different platforms. It came in the 2 Series, 3 Series, 4 Series, even the new Supras, and a couple of platforms that you probably wouldn't even expect. But this video is going to focus specifically on the B58 itself. So whether you're buying, a 5 Series or an X model, whatever the case may be, you'll want to check out those platform-specific forums to get more information on what kind of nuances and common issues you'll have with that platform. But in this video, we're going to focus on the B58 and the auxiliary systems that support it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is coolant loss, and this is probably one of the most common issues that I see on the first gen B58. I have another video discussing this in a lot of detail, so feel free to check that out if you want to see more information on how to fix the issue and what kind of causes can create this issue. But the reason why we see this problem is because we have a very complex cooling system, and you can see here we have two different reservoirs for two separate systems. One's for the engine and the turbo, and the other is for the intercooler system. And both of them have heat exchangers at the front of the car. And those heat exchangers seem to be pretty fragile. They get punctured very easily. There are also a lot of possible areas where you can have leaks inside the engine bay from hoses, the reservoir itself. Even some people like me have had bad caps that allow coolant to evaporate past the seal. So unfortunately, only one of these reservoirs has an actual sensor in it, and that sensor doesn't trip unless the coolant is extremely low. So whatever the car is, I highly recommend just opening up the caps, checking inside, and it's very easy to see what the coolant levels are. If the car is hot, wait for it to cool down and check the levels, but that's definitely not something that I would just let it pass without making sure that the levels are at max. Also, if the owner says that they have to top off the coolant every once in a while, I would not take that lightly. Consider it an issue that they may not be having, but eventually you will if you buy the car. So get it fixed, or get some level of compensation in your sale so that you can get it fixed when you get the car. Now, while coolant loss is extremely common on the first gen B58, the second gen seems to have a different problem with oil consumption. So if you're buying a car with the B58 TU or the second gen B58, I highly recommend making sure that it's not having an oil consumption issue. And this is something, of course, that you can check around. Just look and make sure that there aren't any oil leaks. Look around the bottom trays to make sure that you don't see any oil or anything leaking down underneath the car. You don't see anything leaking down the block. Fortunately, the B58 in stock configuration is pretty easy to see around. There's a lot of open space, so you can get a pretty good look at the turbo and things like that to make sure there aren't any obvious signs of leaks. Also, when you test drive the car, make sure that you check the oil level. You're not going to be able to do it on a cold engine, so driving around for at least 15 minutes or so, get everything up to temperature, and then it should allow you to manually check the oil level, and it'll give you an accurate reading of where the oil is. Again, this has a sensor that will only trip if it's at the minimum line, which typically requires adding a quart of oil. So if it's low, half a quart, 3/4 of a quart, whatever that might be, it might not trip an actual error, but you'll see it if you run a diagnostic to check the oil level yourself. So that's something that you can ask the owner about and get it addressed before you buy the car, or again, get some level of compensation to get it fixed after you get the car. This is something that some of us disagree on, but I am definitely of the belief that there's no reason why a car should be consuming oil. So if they say they have to top it off every couple thousand miles, that's not something I would consider typical, and I would try to get it fixed. Another thing that you need to do that is a little unique for BMWs is scanning the car for codes. Now, you can't just go to O'Reilly's or AutoZone and have them scan it with their OBD scanning tools. You really need to get a pre-purchase inspection done at an indie shop or a BMW dealer, or you can bring the software yourself if you have it. The software I recommend using is called ISTA, and it's the same software that they use at the BMW dealership. The reason why this is better than, a standard OBD scanning tool is because it will give you the actual BMW fault codes in the car. It'll even give you issues with the drivetrain, with electronic modules, It'll even give you historical faults. If it's something that hasn't been cleared by the dealer, you can see issues that they've had in the past and that have been fixed. You can see the mileage that the check engine lights were tripped. It just gives you a lot of really good information about the car. So even if there is an active check engine light or drivetrain malfunction, you can check in ISTA to see if there are any issues that have recently popped up. And that, again, can just give you a little bit of leverage with the car. It will also show you the manufacturing date and eye level on the car, which there's kind of not a whole lot of fine details around this. But if you're planning on tuning the car, you want the eye level and the manufacturing date to be before July of 2020. If the manufacturing date is before July of 2020, but the eye level is after, then it's likely you're going to need a bench unlock to get any software put on the car. And if the manufacturing date is after July of 2020, then it's likely at this point you cannot unlock the car and tune it at all. So again, if you're planning on tuning it with the typical software, try to make sure that you're getting a car that has an eye level date before July of 2020. And if it's after that, you definitely want to make sure that at least the manufacturing date is before July. Otherwise, you will not be able to tune your car until the new unlock method is determined and released. So those are the things that I typically recommend for people that are new in the market looking for a B58 engine BMW or Toyota. Also, if you want way more information than you probably need at this point, especially if you're just looking into cars to buy, I do have a playlist going on my channel that lists out all of my common B58 issue videos I've created. And these are things that aren't like rampant issues going across the board, but they are typical issues that people run into on stock cars, tuned cars, etc. It's not something that's indicating that the cars are extremely unreliable, but I do recommend watching those videos so if any of those issues do come up, you can understand what the problem is and hopefully find a quick fix to get you right back on the road. So thanks again for watching. Hopefully this helps you out if you're new in the market for a B58. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.